So I'm just going to frame the conversation for a minute, and then I'll introduce Steve, and then we'll go at a Q&A. So, I don't think I need to belabor it for this group. I thought there might be a broader group, and I was going to have to sort of explain the 101 of why employers matter. I think, you all sort of know you can't really do job-focused education without employers. If you didn't have employers, how would you know what skills to teach? How would you know what you were preparing learners for? How would you have any confidence learners were going to get jobs at the end? My metaphor, it's like a pitcher pitching and there's no catcher catching. Like that would not probably be very good pitching. But as the problem, as you all know, and we don't have to spell this out, I'm sure in this group, my metaphor is that employers are from Mars and educators are from Venus. It's hard, we don't always speak the same language, move at different speeds. Employers want it yesterday, and you guys take some time, usually, educators, often even different goals and values. So bridging that gulf can be challenging, very challenging, not just in New York, but everywhere. And I think, it's all the more important in the wake of COVID, right? Because what's going to happen now is the needs are going to change very rapidly, even more rapidly than they've been changing. And educators that can't figure out where they're pitching are really going to be at a loss. So this kind of need to engage with employers is more intense and important than ever. But it didn't get any easier, because of COVID. So Stephen Partridge, who's joining us, he's learned this the hard way, the challenges and the and how to overcome them. He spent several decades, as Angie said, building educator-employer partnerships. He currently does it at Northern Virginia Community College, which I think is second largest. Is that right, Steve? And he's the Vice President for Strategic Partnerships and Workforce Innovation. In New York terms, he oversees the ACE division, but it's an ACE division at a huge college. And I think the ACE division is what, 10,000 students, something like that? Your non-credit division, workforce?
Yeah, about 14,000.
14, you're up now, okay. I'm using last year's numbers, okay. And before that, he's had a lot of roles in this world. Before NOVA, he was on at the Workforce Development Board in Charlotte, South Carolina, where he was the president and CEO for 5 years. So the workforce, community college, workforce board. And before that, he worked on the business side at the Charlotte Chamber. So he's been on all sides of this table. He knows all the angles. He's been the employer side, he's been the workforce side, he's been the college side. And when I got some questions, I was on an ACE call a few weeks ago, and I got some questions about, how do we do employer engagement? It's the biggest challenge. How do we face, you have any advice? And I said, well, I know the guy to call. So no one knows all the answers, of course, and Steve just works at it the same way you all work at it. And I hope when we get to the Q&A, this becomes kind of best practice sharing. But he's had a lot of experience and he's had a lot of success. So again, we thought we'd do 20-25 minutes of questions, and then we'll open it up to you. So, Steve, ready, set, go. Ready?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm still focused on that decades comment. That sounds like a lot now that you say that.
You started when you were 3. You started when you were a very young man. Okay. So before we get to the issues at hand, help people get to know you a little. And I don't mean your hobbies. What I mean is the economic, business, employer context where you work in Northern Virginia, so that they can kind of, I'm sure they're all saying, well, New York is different. So let's just have a sense of let's help them understand how it is the same or different. What's it like? What the heck goes on in Northern Virginia? What do they do there besides have a nice airport?
Yeah, they do have a nice airport. If you fly in, gate 35X will be fixed by this time next year, so you won't have to take a bus out to take the flights. Northern Virginia is a little different than Charlotte. I came up 4 years ago, and Northern Virginia was probably more like a lot of community colleges elsewhere in the U.S. That about half your students coming in were looking for transfer, about half were looking for going directly to the workforce. And so you had a lot of manufacturing jobs. Mecklenburg County was the highest concentration of manufacturing jobs in North Carolina. You had Siemens Energy there doing a lot of their power distribution, and those really well-paying apprenticeable jobs. A lot of them were, $25, $30 an hour. You had some really household names, some very premier names, a lot of German companies. People didn't realize there's a huge concentration. Mecklenburg County, the history of North Carolina to the German crown and Princess or Queen Charlotte is the, you go to the airport, there's a big Queen Charlotte picture there, which was connected to the German empire at the time. And so we had a lot of history of European companies. So apprenticeship was a big issue in Charlotte. Not so much with the American manufacturers. That was always a hard sell. But for the German manufacturers, for the European manufacturers, they were great paying jobs that let people get in entry level and really make a middle class earning. When you get to Northern Virginia and you look at the job distribution, when just like New York, when you're paying $40, $50, $60 a square foot, you tend to have your higher skill jobs located in that square footage. So the type of jobs in IT in Northern Virginia or in healthcare in Northern Virginia, they're much higher skill. Healthcare is a little more, you always have the entry level healthcare, but here you just have a lot more of 92%, for example, of the jobs in IT require a bachelor's degree. So that's our highest job demand in Northern Virginia, over 120,000 job postings last year in Northern Virginia, and 92% of those required a degree. The other 8% that didn't require a degree required something else that is the highest credential requirement in Northern Virginia, security clearance. So if you don't have security clearance and you don't have a degree, it's hard to break into IT, even though it's what everyone talks about. Cybersecurity jobs, all that require someone either has IT background or a security clearance. Now, if you have,
and there's a lot of extra IT jobs because it's where the data centers are, right? Like this is not just normal IT, like the IT for the supermarket. This is where the data centers are.
No, if you think about, back many years ago when Al Gore was running for president, they talked about the lockbox and he invented the internet. The internet started in Northern Virginia. DARPA, the Defense Research Institute here, came up with the concept to share data between research institutions. And so you do have a lot of legacy systems here. 70% of the world's internet traffic moves through Northern Virginia. We have the highest concentration of data centers in Northern Virginia. So there's a lot of reasons why Northern Virginia has that tech background. It's often supporting the federal government or the defense contractors that are congregated here. But obviously with Amazon's headquarters moving the HQ2,
this is a New York call.
I know it's a New York call, but they won it too.
Okay,
those jobs too diversify our economy a little because the security clearance at HQ2 are less than what you would find at other IT jobs here. And already since the announcement of HQ2, Google's taken a lot more space. Facebook has taken more space. Microsoft announced 1,500 new jobs last week in software development. All do not require security clearance. But from a college standpoint, 90% of our students come in saying their goal in coming to Nova is to get a 4-year degree. So very different. So our focus historically has been on a transfer institution, less on a workforce preparation. We still have it. Actually, our biggest program is IT outside of general studies and business. And IT is actually an AAS degree, but it actually transfers to most universities in the area. So it's designed as a terminal degree, but does transfer to most universities in the area because that practical skill in the data centers, in the cloud computing space, in cybersecurity is so critical. So it's very different than what I was used to in Charlotte or before that, Arizona. And just to get a little light on what Tamara said, it's my background. I've done economic development in Arizona. I worked for the Department of Commerce and ran the workforce system at the state level. So I was the state person over the WIA system in Arizona, then went and did the local in Charlotte and worked for the chamber. But one of the things I was always struck by is I was always the guy with the money. And people came in and said they needed jobs. And I was always looking for the training to say who could train someone for exactly what the employer wanted. And I would always get in a fight with my local community colleges because I'd say, I have the money. And they'd say, well, here's our catalog.
Wait, so Steve, hold it, because we're going to get to all that.
But that's
hold the thoughts.
That's why I wanted to go into community college. It was the one piece I was missing. It's like, why I need to get on that side of the equation.
Okay, so we're going to parse all these things out, and I'm going to tease you, but if you take that long to answer every question, we'll never get to the end.
Got it. We do this a lot, so she shuts me down.
Sorry, I mean, it's very interesting, but so you've done a lot of places. You know how local it is. You just explained how local it is. So New York, it's particularly hard, right? Or so people tell me, because there's one big set of companies and city agencies kind of downtown that everybody knows about and everybody looks to. These are people on this call are people in colleges all over the city, so they're all thinking, well, J.P. Morgan Chase, how can I help them, or how can I help that hospital? But those big companies and city agencies might or might not hire people with less than bachelors, and then there's people local who are more accessible maybe if you're running the college in whatever borough, but their jobs might not be well paying or might not have a future. So let's pretend I'm Tamar Jacoby, I'm new at the ACE division in blankety blank borough. How do I even figure out what employers I should be targeting? Like, how should I think about that?
Yep. So that's always a struggle, whether you're a workforce board or a college, is to figure out where do you spend your limited resources, your time? Because people always think in the private sector, oh, colleges have all these outreach people to deal with business. I mean, I don't know about you all. I've got like 3 that full-time job is to do sort of employer engagement. And again, we're the second largest college. When I was the workforce board, we were one of the larger workforce boards and had 2 people that did it. So it's always a struggle when you look at the sheer number of businesses to say, who do I spend my time with? And the default for everyone is, who are your marquee employers? When in Charlotte, everyone wanted to have a relationship with Bank of America because their headquarters was there. Everyone wanted Duke Energy. And you could name the top 5 employers who were Fortune 500 companies, and you always wanted to have someone there that was on your board or you were spending time talking with. They may never hire your students, or they might never recruit from your local workforce board, but politically you always thought, oh, I have to show I'm doing something with the big guys, so I got to have that. What we did early on is we invested in labor market analytics data, and not just we subscribe. I mean, because I always go to conferences and say, who subscribes to Burning Glass or NZ or all this, and everyone raises their hand, and then you ask the second follow-up question is, how many people actually have someone that digs through that data full time as their only thing they do, and then the hands start to go down and maybe 1 or 2 stay standing up. We have 2 full-time researchers in the workforce division here at Nova that do nothing but look at that data. And they are the aha people. They look for the trends and the opportunities for where people are not being serviced, which jobs are aging that businesses can't find, which are the sub-degree that we could get into and work with employers to say, hey, we have a solution to fit something. And then once that data gives us that sort of compass point, because again, it gives you a where to go map, it doesn't tell you the solution. Once you have it, you then can get with businesses and start having that dialogue about how you solve that problem. But the insights have to come from actual data, because as you all know, there's always a faculty member, there's always an administrator, there's someone in the college that has a great idea of what the next big thing is, or what they read in the paper over the weekend of where we should spend our time. But data gives you 2 things. It does help figure what it really is, but also allows you to say no when people just show up with those solutions that probably aren't really solutions, but you say, well, the data tells us something different.
Great. So data. So that's big step number 1. We're making progress. So that's sort of step 1. We figured out who to call. What are our target companies? So the next step is like, how the heck do you get in the room with them, right? Like, is this about knocking on doors? Is this about cold calling? I mean, even I'm Tamar Jacoby at my college. Even if I could figure out who to call, like, are they going to take my call? Like, how do you start the relationship? How do you get the first date?
Yeah, when I first got here, we had 5 people that were our business development people that code called and went out and tried to sell our catalog. And that's not what I wanted. I mean, if you actually dug into the data, we probably barely covered our costs for that team on new contracts they brought in. But that's not what businesses wanted. I mean, businesses want someone that can be part of a solution, they get hit all day, as probably you all do. I get other people trying to sell me training solutions all the time as a community college. And so I'm always surprised that we would take the same tactic with our customers. We do an approach that really, we don't call on individual businesses. We do a lot in the space of economic development. I serve on the local EDA. We do, through our data, we give it away, but we package it in ways that puts the college in a position of authority. So we give all these infographics and all this research to the K-12 system, to the local economic developers, and to partner organizations with our name on it, but we co-brand it with them, so they distribute it far and wide. And then often people will call us. We've had some companies call us and say, I saw some of the data you put out. Can we talk? Because we're seeing the same thing and maybe you guys have a solution as a college partner. We also created several academic partnerships with trade associations where we went in and said, I don't care about sponsoring dinners. I don't care about, talking at events from the podium. I care about doing research. And so we become sort of the research sponsor, and we will research with their membership problems that their membership is challenged with. So we did this with our tech council, where we put out several major reports on the workforce and challenges in hiring and challenges around security clearance and how you source talent. So it puts us again in that role of authority. And then that puts us in that leadership role in the community.
Great. And so, okay, so there you are. You figured out who to call. Now they know and trust you. Not only that, they kind of respect you. It's time to swoop in for what we want, that training partnership. So you've had this whole relationship. You haven't mentioned training partnership. I'm going to use my bad dating metaphor all the way through. You've been dating for weeks and you haven't even mentioned marriage. So now we're getting to the point where we want to hook up with them. How do we start that conversation? Do you whip out, then here's where I'm going back to what you said earlier. Do you whip out your course catalog and say, what do you want? How do you start the conversation about training?
Yeah, again, it's never about training. Training is one thing we provide. We also know that the largest source of talent in a local community often is the community college. So when you think about what employers really want is people that do exactly what they need and have the skills they want, doesn't cost them a thing. So I run the career services for the college as a whole as well. It's part of it in our portfolio. So it's all about business engagement. And what do employers want? They want our students. They would like our students to be the perfect fit so they don't have to spend any money on them. But that's that dialogue that we can have with them. It's like, where are your pain points? We sit down with them and via, the relationship with NBTC, the Tech Council, or other opportunities that we've encountered them at. And we say, hey, can we sit down and just pick your brain about what are some of the challenges your industry or your company is facing? We never bring up training. I will guarantee any conversation that starts that way will always end up on how can we help? And it's usually not us saying at the end, hey, we've got training, They know we have training. We never have to say that. Our biggest partner is Amazon Web Services. When we first talked with them, training was never an issue. And in fact, they called us after some initial meetings and said, we'd like you to run our apprenticeship program on the East Coast. So we now run probably 70 to 80% of their apprenticeship program for the entire company. But we didn't pitch that. We didn't sit there and go, we've got the solution. Look at our catalog. We've done this for other companies. We let them tell us what they needed. They worked with us to build it. And now that relationship has grown over the last 3 years, where we've had over 600 apprentices going through in various forms in 4 to 5 different job categories, all the way with people who have no degree, all the way with people that have master's degrees going through our program. So it's, as you all know, community colleges sometimes have that chip on their shoulder that, big corporations don't want to work with us. They only want to work with the 4-year. They do want to work with us. They often don't know how. And that's that initial conversation of just, what can we help you with? And somewhat just listening rather than talking is how we usually start it.
Okay, but so eventually you need to get to that conversation, right? Somebody mentioned training, okay, them, you, whoever it is, somehow it got clear that was what we were talking about. You often hear that employers don't know what skills they need, like don't know how to describe them. They haven't analyzed them and they can't really tell you what they want. Do you find that? And how do you handle that when that happens? I'm a widget maker. I need people who can work the Bridgeport machine. Well, that doesn't, what skills do you really need tomorrow?
Right. I mean, it's sometimes easier with manufacturers. They actually know some of the competence and skills. If you talk to the line managers of what they need, it becomes a lot more gray in sort of those gray collar jobs or white collar jobs where I need someone with a college degree. That's the default because they don't really know what they actually need, what makes that person in that job successful. They often can't articulate that, especially at the HR level. When you get to the line manager, they might say, I need someone that can project manage or they can get into those skills. But often you're right, in those initial meetings, they say they can't find, 500 of X, but they really don't know why.
And so how do you help them articulate that?
Usually we work with them, we get in the experts, you're never going to get your solution at the HR level. when you sort of build that relationship, you're going to want to talk to the people actually on the floor of the business. Who is this person going to report to? What does a successful candidate look like? Again, you're trying to help them figure out how to source talent.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, we're educators, but we're really about talent solutions. And again, training is one lever we can pull, but that's not what they want to hear from us all the time. Oh, if you just spend some money, we'll get you what you need. It may be that we just want to get you in front of the right students who already have what they need on our campuses.
Got it. Got it. So it's training, recruitment. This is not a question I meant to ask. Training, recruitment. What else are your levers?
I mean, a lot of times when companies are expanding, they may be new to market. They don't know what they don't know. And so we try to say we can do soup to nuts. We'll work with other partners, but we'll try to be the lead on, oh, you are expanding 1,000 new jobs. Here's what works well to recruit in this market, because they don't even know how to recruit in market.
Yeah. Okay.
And especially here, you've got a lot of companies sometimes that put themselves here because of their client, the federal government, and they got weird names that no one even knows what they are because they're not consumer-facing brands. So I have no problem trying to sell a job at Google because everyone knows what Google is, or Facebook. But when you talk about some super secret spy agency contractor and you're saying, I want to go out there and we can't really talk about what we do, but then it's like, you need to help them figure out how to get that talent.
Yeah.
So you really try to say we do it all, and then you become a trusted partner when they do need training.
Got it. But the all is recruitment. What else is in the all package? Recruitment, screening, what's in the all package?
There isn't really a set package. If the company needs something, we figure out a way to do it. And it might not be us on point. We may then reach out to the workforce board or look for funding in different ways. We partner with our 4-year partners because we can't do everything. If they say they really need some advanced training at master's or PhD level. And in this area that happens. So we find those different partners to put the package together.
Got it. That's super helpful. Okay, so now we're getting along in this relationship step by step by step. Now we're going to get to the point where we're actually shaping a training program, right? Developing curriculum, just picking curriculum, deciding curriculum. That works best when you do it together, right? And it's a very collaborative process. Talk about that. Tell us maybe a story of how you did that, maybe with Amazon or some other.
Yeah, I'll share the Amazon one because that's probably the biggest employer. And again, part of what we like about that is we don't have to talk about it. Amazon talks about it. They go to luncheons and the first thing they say is, we're expanding here in Northern Virginia thanks to Nova, because they're one of our key partners. And they go around the world and say that. So it's free advertising. So why are there things that you give back to the company, because if it pays off, they become your spokesperson. But the partnership really develops is you listen to what they need, which is, training 101 is what do you need done, but you have to ask the good questions. And you have to realize we tend to build things in higher ed that have sort of staying power. We love that because you build a program, you put all this curriculum design into something, you say, it's done. I've got the next 3 or 4 years to sit back and coast off that revenue that's now going to come in on all these students. The lifespan of one of our apprenticeship programs is less than 4 months, because after every cohort, they start making changes. So we have had to rethink our entire process, because even our pricing model is sort of like, I only use a curriculum developer, every 2 or 3 years for a certain type of program. But every 3 to 4 months, every time a cohort wraps up, every 12 weeks, there's a deep dive and looking at the graduates and what their skills were, where they lacked, what we need to change. Is that credential that we have in there? Because we have a credential-based apprenticeship program. So it's about 10 to 12 weeks in a classroom at Nova. And they get 3 to 4 industry certifications as they move through that. And then they spend a year on the job. All our apprenticeships registered. So it is all USDOL or state registered. So it is clearly intensive. It is something that pays off. The cost for each apprentice is around $12,000. So it's not an inexpensive program to have a IT faculty member in a classroom for 40 hours a week. But for them, it is worth it. These are all former military, so the clearance issue is part of the reason they're making that investment. They have clearance.
So in a way, you're sort of leading into my next question, but I'm still wondering how I'm going to do this when I get in the room with them, on this college that doesn't know how to do this. Like, how, do we start with something I've got in the catalog and we tweak it a little, or do we start with a blank piece of paper, or do I write it and then they approve it, or do they approve it and then you write?
Yeah,
How does
it's an
that work?
iterative process. I mean, we usually start with a blank piece of paper. Even if we think we have something that's off the shelf, we start with listening and really mapping out what they're looking for. We then come back to them, and we may have certain things off the shelf we may pull to build that out. But at the end of the day, they want to know something meets their needs. And I'll tell you, when you have that sort of change factor of every 4 months changing curriculum, we really try to make sure that we build it not just for one company. When we sat down with Amazon and said, we're going to invest a lot of money. I mean, for the first 2 years, we probably lost money on that partnership or maybe broke even. But the goal is to build an industry solution. Because again, back to your data, we knew that partnering with Amazon on those jobs existed at another 100 companies in Northern Virginia. So if we could make it work for them and they became our spokesperson, other companies would show up and say, can you do for me what you did for Amazon? Because they're all stealing each other's talent now. We have a deficit of about 40,000 IT jobs a year. I mean, the only way those companies source it is to import talent or steal from each other. So it's critical that I think you look the big picture. Otherwise, you'll get stuck in a very expensive program that doesn't have any shelf life beyond the one employer. So we really have a goal of 90% of the curriculum is the same between employers. So we tell them up front, if it's just you just need someone to design some curriculum just for your company and it has no market value outside your company, we'd probably turn them down.
Okay, so he's turning down employers now. Wow, wow. Okay, so you're also about 3 questions ahead of me. Let's go back, and we'll come circle around to that again. So again, I'm having in this new relationship with my company. We're still talking one company. I'm struggling with that at my rudimentary stage. What's it like? So you sort of gave me a sense. I was gonna, do you talk every day? Do you talk every week? Like how? You said you talk at the end of every apprenticeship program. All relationships are different, right? Like couples, but how intense, when it's good, how intensive is it? Like, are they in your hair all the time?
All the time. I mean, we assigned someone, actually my person who was assigned to my relationship with Amazon just got hired away by Amazon. So that's the type of relationship. They talked to her every week, some days, every day. She was in the classrooms, checking on the students, making sure that everything was going on. She went to their planning retreats to talk about forecasting budgets so they could plan accordingly. We want our people embedded so they see them as an extension of their staff, not a NOVA employee that they have to call and complain about.
Yeah. Great. Embedded extension of their staff. Okay. So, and I'm going to use language that I'm guessing some of the people on the Zoom are going to bristle at, but what's, for better word, what's the power dynamic in this relationship? Is the company in the driver's seat? Like, it sounds like kind of client and vendor. Is that fair?
It's fair. I mean, yes, they write us checks to do certain things. So from that standpoint, it's a traditional relationship, but it is paid off in tons over for the college because of this initial relationship, we then launched the country's first cloud computing 2-year degree. And they go around the world that said it was launched at Nova. And we launched it, we quickly gave it away to every other school that wanted it. But the goal is to brand us as we're the partner you want to work with if you want to get things done. We're your incubator, your testing space.
Yeah.
So from that standpoint, we've got a great partnership. We do have one of their high-level execs on our foundation board. I can email people and they quickly respond when we need things. So it's definitely a partnership. But at the end of the day, if you're doing 200 plus apprentices per year with them and the economy falls apart, I'll tell you that they called us after we just finished up the last cohort because we had to do the last session partly remotely. And they said, we had several scheduled in June and July. Can we just push those out till fall? Because they're probably the one company making money in this, but they still financially, the future's unknown. So they wanted to kind of push that out. And that obviously hits our budget numbers because we had things set up that were in this budget year that now have to be pushed in the next budget year. So it is the relationship vendor in some sense, but the payoff is well beyond whatever they pay us.
Well, and I was going to say there's some balance too, right? Because they need you. I mean, they could set up the ability to teach and have instructors and do all that, but they don't have it. So, they need you as much as you need them, sort of. So that's got to give you
Well, and I'll say, most companies since the 80s, they sort of divested themselves. The big companies always wanted to have in-house universities and huge training departments. And the mindset for most corporations, publicly traded companies, is do what you do best and sort of divest yourself of those other things you don't do. So you tend to hire marketing agencies, you have a market department, but you work with an agency. Same with training. They know what they want, but they don't want to have on staff 20 trainers in every discipline on a moment's notice they may need. It's easier to work with a partner, but you have to set yourself up to be that partner because they don't want to work with a bureaucracy and they don't see boundaries or borders. So if they say, I've got people in all over the greater New York area, they don't want to just say, I'm going to work with one. They want to know that they're one partner, if you're the lucky school to partner with them, that can go out and do training everywhere, which I know creates dynamics because we have that in Virginia where we're supposed to stay in our little service area and we're not supposed to cross those lines, but the businesses demand it. So you have to work out those relationships amongst yourselves of how do you deliver on a seamless service.
Okay, you're like 3 questions ahead of me. So now I'm coming to the industry, getting beyond the company to the industry. You've talked about that a little bit. I guess the question I would add to it is, supply and demand, right? So you don't want to be training, I know there's insatiable demand for cloud technicians, but you don't want to be training 100,000 cloud technicians if the real demand is only going to be, 50,000 cloud technicians. And you can use your labor market to a point, but how do you, if you're serving now Amazon and 20 other companies and you're trying to kind of plan ahead, let's put aside COVID and, big wrinkles. How do you kind of manage that supply demand, ecosystem problem?
Yeah, I mean, it is a problem at times because we tend to overcorrect. That's just government in general. There's a problem, we throw a lot of resources at it, and then we don't turn off the spigot soon enough, and then we oversupply. But I think we need to do a better job of that. And that gets into some things I think overall in higher ed we're not real good at. We're not always good on the advising piece. We're not always good at saying no, especially in times of diminishing resources. If another section of a couple degree classes can make, even if there's no demand for that, I don't know many institutions that would say, well, it's student choice. They want to take those classes. Doesn't matter, there's no jobs at the end. But I think in light of what we're seeing now in New York and around the country, major cities, where I think the solution is often higher ed to this problem because we know a lot of the great paying jobs often require a degree.
Yeah.
But the same problem is the institution because of some of the things, the bad practices we've allowed to sort of, grow beyond what we think it's a problem. We don't get the advising right. We let students, often at-risk students, get into programs that don't lead to careers. We often let the dropout rates, the barriers we put in place. So if we're really going to be the employer's advocate and make sure they want diverse talent, they want diversity in their workforce. How do we ensure we get the right people to the right employers with the right skills and not lose anyone along the way? Because if this was a talent supply chain, we'd look really bad on paper. No, we'd be out of business because most supply chain that has like a 60, 70% loss rate, it would not make any sense to be in business.
Yeah. Okay, very provocative. But I got 2 or 3 more questions and I want to open it up. I'm sure people are getting antsy, so think about your questions, folks. I've never seen the ACE group this quiet for this long. You must be mesmerizing them. So you're the ACE division, effectively. You're the non-credit side of the college. You've built this great relationship with Amazon or at Company X. Is that the end of it? Is that all they want? Is that all you are interested in doing? Less cagey way of saying this, what about the credit side of college? Like, are you going to bring them in at some point? Is there a role for them in this game?
Yes, and employers are forcing that connection more than you would think. Companies are savvy. They don't like to pay for things that don't need. Just like I said, they prefer to get a student exactly with the right skills at the right time. If they send someone to my apprenticeship program, who doesn't have a degree, they'll all say if that individual moves up in the company long-term, they're going to need a degree. They have to understand the strategy, the business, all the things a degree can bring. But if you tell them you just paid $12,000, I mean, $12,000 for a 10 to 12-week program is not inexpensive. That's the cost of tuition at a 4-year. So if that's your tuition, they want to know, is that stackable? can that go towards your degree? So we actually worked, it took 1.5 years with our faculty, but now our apprenticeship stacks into our degrees. So if they've passed the certification exam, often a CompTIA or AWS certification, if they passed that in the previous 5 years, they get prior learning credit in our cybersecurity or cloud computing degree.
Got it.
So now that's great. It's a good step, but we can give away anything if we want. I mean, but the question is, does it stack to a bachelor's degree? And about a week before the pandemic hit, we were about to do a press release with our first 4-year partner that in Pathway, that degree, those prior learning credit would keep stacking with Marymount University. And we hope to have that with George Mason, our biggest partner in the region. So again, the goal is to tell an employer, we heard you, you can start breaking up the degree into modules that you need someone on the front line immediately. You don't want to wait 4 years. You can get them in the door in 12 weeks. And then they can keep growing with the company, because often the companies pay for tuition assistance, but they don't lose any of that investment you've already made.
And the credit side is happy because now you've helped them, and you're happy because you've helped them and all that.
Yeah, you know, it's odd and sort of counterintuitive. You had to say, these are students that will come to your program. And they were like, oh, really? They didn't really see how non-credit really helped, feed the funnel for the credit side. But now that you started putting it together, and it took a long time. We actually had Amazon and other companies tell our faculty chairs and like, guys, this is stupid. It's not set up this way. But it took like 1 year of saying that for them finally to sort of,
Yeah, we can make jokes probably about the credit side all day on this call.
Yeah.
So I got 2 more questions, and then I'm going to open it up. We talked, so I know at Nova, your non-credit side doesn't have advisory councils, but the credit side does have advisory councils. So like, how do you help them make those work? I mean, we all know, I've been to 1 million schools where they brag, we have this great advisory council, and then you ask them what it entails, and it's like the guy comes to lunch once, the people come to lunch once a year, and we do most of the talking, and at the end we ask some advice, and then we don't really pay attention. I mean, no one quite tells you that, but that's sort of what happens in a lot of places. Yeah. How do you make these advisory councils more than just like a perfunctory lunch?
Yeah, that's similar to Nova. We had all these groups, and they meet the required once a year. Over lunch, and we've sat in a lot of those, and it is a faculty member lecturing about how great their program is, and at the last 5 minutes you say, any suggestions or improvements?
Exactly.
One of the first things we did is, one, workforce non-credit was charged with redesigning the advisory board structure. And so our college board said, Steve, I want you to take your labor team and figure out, we did new policies. One of the policies is their term limits, because we had some people that served 15 years. We had some people still serving who had passed on. Many people were retired, but they love our program. They like, it's like, but that's not the goal. And one of the requirements now is you work for an employer that currently hires out of the 2-year program in which they're advising. Because we found, especially in IT and some of our more popular disciplines, is it was always cool to have the big marquee names. But when you looked at what their hiring trends in the market were, they didn't hire 2-year. So it's kind of like, why? And then they would argue like, well, our students transfer to Mason. It's like, yeah, but an AAS degree, because these advisory boards of the businesses are always our terminal degrees. Theoretically, we're telling the public you can get a job when you're done. So if we don't talk to the employers who actually do the hiring, then we're missing the boat. But again, that sort of inflation about like, yes, but my students go on to Mason and other universities and then they get a job. It's like, but that's not, it should be a AA degree. It should not be an AAS. So we staff and advise those groups. We give them updates every year. When a member turns over, we give them leads of companies to talk to who fit the criteria based on our labor market data from Burning Glass and other sources.
But so the key there really is, the takeaway is, they have to hire, like no hire, no ticky, no washy. Like if you're not going to hire people, we don't want to talk to you. That makes total sense. But I think a lot of colleges don't say it. Okay, so last question, and then it's a little bit of subversive question. Who's surprised? Because you don't know New York. You don't know anything about New York other than what I've told you, or CUNY. I know you've been there recently as a tourist. But one of the big challenges in New York, and I'll sort of characterize it, and everybody will start throwing stuff at me. But one of the big sort of added complexities at CUNY is it's what I would call a federated system, where there's a central office, but then there's I think it's 26 or 25 or something colleges underneath that central office, and they all have a lot of autonomy. You know, there's 7 community colleges, each of them separately accredited, 7 senior colleges, 7 graduate and professional schools. And there's a complicated balance of power, but it comes into every aspect of every relationship. You know, where's the ladies' room? Well, I don't know if Central or, you know, a college should answer. And so, you know, in that circumstance, and you've got a big city where, you know, at least in before COVID, and we hope again soon, you could take the subway from any part of the city to any other part of the city, and yet you have all these institutions. So it's not a blank slate, and that's why it's a little bit of a dangerous question. You know, they're managing this federated thing the way they do. But if you were in the leadership, either at Central or at a campus, how would you think about turning that federated structure to your advantage in reaching out to employers? You know, should Central be doing it? Should the individual colleges be doing it? How do we make sure that we're not, like, everybody's not approaching the same hospital and saying we can train for you, like, without, you know, but still letting the colleges have some independence? I mean, and again, forgive him his answer, because it won't be politic, because he doesn't know you. But what would your answer be?
You know, like I said earlier, businesses don't care about political lines. They don't understand bureaucracies. They just want the service. In Charlotte, we had a similar issue, like I mentioned, that everyone wanted to have the relationship with Bank of America. And there was only one workforce board, but you had dozens of groups, including the community college, all reaching out to business. And what we realized, since all of us only had 1 or 2 or 3 people in each organization, we said, why don't we all come together? We got a CRM. We said, let's start to create an alliance that is sort of, you know, to the employer, they see we have all these resources working together. They don't know that I'm Central Piedmont Community College or you're the workforce board. They just know they're showing up, and we get a book of business, and based on the organization's mission or areas of expertise, because certain colleges might have more depth in IT and the other one might be in health sciences, there's ways to really increase the net that we can throw in the business. Because I mean, how many businesses are in the New York area? I mean, hundreds of thousands of businesses, from small startups all through big JP Morgans. So in your best year, each college can maybe reach out to a few hundred and talk with businesses. And again, when we did our analysis in Charlotte and we asked everyone to say what businesses they met in the previous year, 60% of them were duplicative. So we were talking to all of the same businesses, as opposed to these other businesses that say, I never hear from anyone.
Yeah, wow.
So if the goal is to make sure all businesses are touched, you have to work together, because no one organization can do it. And again, from the consumer standpoint, the businesses don't care about what college they're speaking with, because they all think in a college you all work together, so you must all share information and resources. So if you build an organization from the you know, whether it's a student-centered approach or a business-centered approach, you have to look at from their vantage point. How can I make it as easy as possible to access our services? And trust me, there is more than enough business for all of you. Everyone is facing a skills gap even before COVID. It's going to get, people will give the illusion that there's unemployment's higher, therefore the skill gap has gone away. No, because most of the people that were laid off initially were in the hospitality sector, retail sector. They don't have the IT, they don't have the healthcare background. This can be a huge opportunity for us all to work together to finally fix some of those gaps and improve economic mobility for a big part of our population, but we can only do it together.
Brilliant. Okay, that was really good, Steve. Thank you. I'm so glad I brought you to this party. Now I'm sure that other people will have questions. Angie, do you want to kind of handle that, or just let people pop up? Or yeah, you tell me.
Yeah, it's a pretty big group. We have about 36 folks, so I'm thinking if you can either raise your hand or kind of just jump in, that would be great. And there's a couple of questions, maybe just to lead off in the chat. So Jason asked about just kind of what level of employers, is it C-suite, is it HR, is it business unit manager? And then Steve, I had asked the question in terms of, you've been now at Nova for 4 years. It sounded like you walked into a staffing structure, right? That was catalog-based business development, kind of selling the catalog, I think were the words that you use. Could you talk a little bit also about just how you've internally structured your team?
Sure.
You mentioned a bit about a data team, but I'd love to kind of maybe understand a little bit more.
Yeah, so I'll start with that one and then answer about the C-suite versus HR. When I got here, we had a total, including part-time staff, almost 80 people in the non-credit, and at about $11 million book of business. So it was a big group, but it was the way we structured it, similar to maybe how each college might. It was structured by campus. We have 6 campuses, so we had almost 6 identical teams on each campus, because again, our model was a student walks in and we must be there to meet with them and take their money and walk them through the catalog. And you had a catalog development team, and then you had, you know, your business outreach team. You had all these people, and actually if you added up the number of people, what we paid and our instructors, we actually lost about $500,000 a year, although they never ever talked about that. But so we restructure ourselves again to deliver what we're talking about. We have a data labor market analytics team. We've got we now have an apprenticeship team. We have a business outreach team, but again, it's more not on sales. It's more about creating those partnerships. And then we would like a special projects team. And then we still have our operations team, but we went totally online. You know, we didn't need to replicate the same person at every campus, because that's not, when you looked at the data, everyone said, oh no, we're there for the students. If you actually looked when the students came in, it was mostly our ESL students for testing, which we mandated. So other than that period of time at the beginning of every semester, it was like crickets most of the time for those teams that sat around. So through attrition, we didn't do any major restructuring. We now have about 30 people that do almost the same amount of business, but much more focused on what we're trying to do. We also, as I didn't mention earlier, as part of the strategy of, again, trying to give back to the community as a way to sort of, you're a leader in the community, we launched a year ago with a $1 million grant, what we call our Tech Pathways program, which is a region-wide marketing initiative to push IT jobs. And our steering committee, we got all the big companies to provide input on the steering committee. So we got to help drive an initiative in a leadership role with all the big C-suite leaders across the region to help solve long-term their skill gap. And I can tell you that paid off many, many times for the amount of work that we had to put into that. So it was really more about really about solving problems. We do see our job in the workforce team is coming up with solutions to solve the regional workforce challenges. Not to only be the training provider, but because sometimes that's not what's needed.
Yeah. I love the language you use. I mean, just the language you use, it's not educator language. You know, you talk about your business, you talk about your book of business, you talk about, you know, if we really, I mean, it's just, you have a totally different mindset than so many educators I talk to. There's that lingering question about C-suite or HR.
Yeah, we start with the C-suite, and we often use our president or a member of our board to get in those initial meetings to kind of, because it's never the C-suite person you're going to work with long-term. It's you build the relationship, and then after that initial couple discussions, you say, who on your team can help lead this on your, you know, for your organization? Who can speak for you within the organization to help move this project forward? And then you get someone down on either talent development, it could be HR, but sometimes it's a line of business manager.
That's better, right, than HR.
Yeah.
Isn't HR sort of a waste of time usually?
Yeah, I mean, HR is HR. HR sometimes, I'm not a huge fan, because I think that sometimes the resistance that companies have to try and creative ways to solve the talent gap with non-traditional talent is they start with the bachelor's and work backwards. Where we sort of say that forget the bachelor's, what do you actually need to do? And then again, to do that, you have to then speak with the people, you know, on the shop floor or in the trenches.
Right. Other questions? Angie, you should manage the questions because you one pop up. Come on, I've never seen you guys this quiet. I'm like the experience.
Yeah, folks, jump in. I'm not seeing anything else in the chat just yet, but
it's because they all know how to do this.
Hi, this is Joan. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, I have a question about the CRM you decided to use and how long it took you to get buy-in across the 6 different schools to participate and implement it and really make it a viable tool for your overall effort.
Yeah, the CRM, I mean, we're having a similar challenge at Nova. We're trying to get a new CRM just across the college, and it's taken us probably 6 to 12 months to figure out that we would like Salesforce, but because we at Nova are part of a consortium, the Virginia Community College system, we have to wait for them to do a procurement so that a system can be chosen for all 23 colleges. So that's what we're doing here at Nova. The one I was referencing was back in Charlotte. It was only one college. It was a workforce board of college, about a dozen nonprofits. and it took us maybe a lot less time because it was using some different pots of money that didn't require us to use the normal state procurement systems. So we moved much more quickly on that one. So it was 6 months or less. Once we knew that's what we wanted, it took a year though to get to the point where you set up the rules of the road of saying, if I put my data in there, how do I know Jim's not going to steal it and run out and talk to my client? But that took a lot longer than the actual deciding on what system to use.
Interesting, really interesting.
There's, I think, a couple of more questions in the chat in terms of the content of research that you're presenting to employers. And I threw up a question in terms of, you've talked a lot about technology. I'm wondering if you could talk about some of the other sectors that are important to NOVA and
Yep.
what that looks like.
Yeah, technology is by far the biggest. Like I said, they're probably 10% of the new jobs that are hired every year is the tech sector. Healthcare is maybe a far second. It's such a big one with tech. The next one down is maybe 13,000 unfilled jobs a year in the space of healthcare, all sorts of jobs. And then from there, it sort of fragments a lot. There's not one concentration. We really fall behind at NOVA because we were such a transfer institution. We don't have as much invested at scale in the skilled trades. And that is becoming a huge pressure point for us because of the retiring baby boomers. Many of them have stayed in the workforce, thankfully, a lot longer. Otherwise, this probably would have come up 5-10 years ago. But now we're seeing a lot of bandwidth issues in Northern Virginia where we can't expand as quickly because some of the trades, some of the construction jobs just aren't there. Some of it's issues with what you always see in very urban areas. You sort of the perception. There are more PhDs and master level people living in Northern Virginia than anywhere else in the world, which makes all their kids, the advice they get from their parents is you need to go to higher ed and you need to go here, even if they might be more inclined to work with their hands and do something else. So there's an image issue in Northern Virginia. A lot of the skilled trades have. A lot of those programs have died in the K-12 system here. So it's much more of a niche product, but it's something we need to double down on. And we're trying to also change that, just like many of you in manufacturing might know that people have an image of manufacturing, and we've spent a lot of years trying to change that. It's not dirty you don't come home every night with stuff under your nails. It's now robots and iPads, and same with the skilled trades. So we've tried to sort of position certain trades that, a lot of this is remote monitoring. So you're using network technology. Our data center technician program is a skilled trade because you keep those HVAC systems running, you keep the electrical systems running so the servers don't go down. But when you're doing the diagnostic, you have to know, is this a part that's broken or did someone hack the system? There's some questions you have to understand about network technology that is more than just a technician. So they're becoming these hybrid technology jobs. And so we're positioning them so that parents and kids see that, oh, my son's or daughter's a technologist, as opposed to, oh yeah, they're an HVAC person. It's like, there is an image that we have to overcome in our particular market that we're trying to sort of reposition certain jobs. But that's something that we're trying to grow at the college. But that's an underinvestment that we've made because we were such a transfer institution.
Really interesting. And what about the other question, really interesting question about the research? Like kind of what are you doing and who's doing it and what's the, how extensive is that? What are you offering?
We say research.
I think we're talking the labor market information.
Oh yeah.
No.
We have, like I said, 2 full-time people plus a graphic artist that works 29 hours a week with that team so that they take the research and then visualize it to give out to different audiences. So with all, it's a major investment for the college because it comes out of the workforce budget, which we are self-sufficient. So you're putting, $300,000 a year into subscriptions and staff, and it was a major investment and a gamble in the beginning because everyone's like, you're supposed to make money. What are you doing investing all this? But it's now paid off. That I don't think, the president doesn't make a speech without calling Alex. We call him Alex, the data guy. He leads that department. That's his Twitter handle if you want to follow him. And so it's always that data is so important to what we do as an institution, both for making decisions, but also for telling the story of why we do what we do. Otherwise, it's sort of like, yeah, higher ed's great, but if we talk about the vacancies and we talk about the need, we're just able to get local investment. We don't get any, we get a very small portion of local dollars as a college. Most of our is tuition and state dollars. But they used to provide us some money for, the state said if you build new facilities, this local jurisdiction need to put in a small percentage for connectivity to the building that you're building. But they just took some of that money based on data we've shared with them to put into operations. So they carved off about $1.5 million a year to go into IT, because we talked about these IT credentials and how they're so expensive for many of our students, so that now our students going through at no cost of their own, if they're in our IT program towards an IT degree, they can take all the certification exams free of charge. It will not be charged to them. They'll use that pot of money. So again, to make them more work ready. And the cost of those exams, you know, range $200 to $300 per test. And often there's 3 of those in those degrees.
A model for this closer to home for CUNY is Monroe SUNY. I mean, that's there too. Like, it's the labor market information service is what drives the whole strategy.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, if you have, you know, it's sort of the beating heart of the planning. And it's that kind of beating heart that can then organize the credit and the non-credit to kind of have a seamless path, you know, really be connected to the economy and drive you know, again, a single strategy as opposed to, you know, 42 strategies, every college, every division.
Yep.
Other questions?
I think there's one here. Both Kenneth had asked about, there's a few questions here on your experience in the public sector. So kind of working with government. Also wondering about, you know, I think there's an implication, Kenneth, in your question in terms of WIOA dollars and kind of displaced worker, kind of just how you're interacting with the public sector, whether it's for working on workforce issues or accessing federal.
Yeah, we have a whole separate chapter. It's a I'm kidding. Separate hour and a half where we talk to Steve about the WIOA and the college and the relation. He's been on all sides of that. Sorry, only kidding. Go ahead with other question. Rest of the question.
So public sector, public dollars, and then I think there's a question from Raymond from City College. Just clearly, you're talking about the employer-centered programs, kind of employer first, but wondering about how you're balancing kind of, if you have any kind of general public kind of tuition paying folks that enter or join cohorts, or is that just like completely not the model?
Yeah, well, I'll start off with, we obviously work closely with our WIOA partners. We have 2 workforce boards in Northern Virginia. I serve on the board of both those. So we try to keep a good connection. We provide all their labor market analytics because for some reason they never invested in that. One of them said they tried it 20 years ago and it didn't work out, so they never reinvested. So all the labor market they put out, including tomorrow's board meeting, Alex from my team will be doing a presentation to the board on the pandemic and how it's hit the local economy and where the opportunities are for retraining. So we work closely. We are not funded. I mean, when I was in Charlotte and ran the workforce board, I had a lot more money than those 2 boards combined. The way the metrics fall for the state allocation, because Northern Virginia has such wealth and such degree attainment, the amount of share we get, you know, there's probably between the 2 boards, maybe about $1.2 million per year in training dollars available across a 2.5 million region. So it's not a lot of dollars as far as training dollars. But Virginia does have a new program that was launched about 2.5 years ago called Fast Forward, which pays for and buys down the cost of high demand credentials. So that's really the only financial aid the non-credit world has in Virginia. We don't get like North Carolina and some southern states where you have a lot of dollars put into they're subsidized the same rate, often even more in some areas than the credit students. So we are totally self-sufficient. So if we have a $3,000 class, that is the cost for what it costs to put that on when you add in the overhead, the salary, and everyone for the division. That's why part of getting our costs low is so that we can keep our costs as low as possible. But Fast Forward takes that $3,000 cost. You have to put in the cost of the credential and everything in there, but the state would then pay 2/3 of that. So the student will only be on the hook for $1,000. And there's financial aid for 80% of that $1,000 if they qualify. So you could take a $3,000 credential class for $200, but it's a pay for performance. So I get the first third up front. If the student completes the class successfully, I get paid the next third. And when the student sits for and passes the certification exam, I'm paid the final third. And that exam cannot be administered by NOVA. The exam has to be a third-party validated credential. So it can't be something like the NOVA credential for IT that we made up and they pass the class and they get a certificate. It's got to be CompTIA, or something that we can show in our labor market analytics that employers hire off of. So if we can't show an employer if they don't hire on it, we can't get that put on that program, because there's a lot of coding languages. There's just no credential for software. It's, you know a good software code when you see it, but it's not like you sit for an exam. There are some out there, but no one hires on them. So we can't show the state that should be added to the list of in-demand credentials. So we do have some focus programs to help people get into high demand areas like IT and healthcare, but it has to be credential based.
But okay, so that's a whole nother really interesting topic, is the Fast Forward program that there's more to be said and dug into. But Steve, talk about the important question, because not everybody you're training in these conversations we're talking about is customized, right? There's a suggestion here. This question made it sound like, oh wait, is there anybody paying tuition over here? A lot of these people are paying tuition.
Oh
right?
yeah, of those 14,000, only about 1,000 probably come in via employers paying it. The other 13,000 are open enrollment, and it's a mixed bag. I mean, there are some that are clearly career switchers. Those would probably be more in the fast forward, right, because they're using that subsidies to make a switch. Those are usually our sort of non-traditional students. They're adult learners. They might have come from hospitality in an area, and they're looking to get into a short-term program that will give them a bump into a new career, hopefully on a ladder that keep going.
But the main model, right? Let me try to describe it and then you tell me if it's wrong. Is you build the program, let's say with Amazon, and like at the beginning, it's just for the people they pick or the people they're going to hire. But eventually, when you broaden it out to other industries in the thing, then you make it open enrollment and other industries in the region, and you make it open enrollment, and people come with their dollars, and whether they're fast forward dollars or some other kind, and pay for the program, right?
Yeah, I mean, you take the learnings from the employers to make your open enrollment offerings. I mean, our goal over the next few years is every open enrollment will have two different strategies. One is sort of you're an additive class. You already have a degree, you're in the workforce, you need to learn about data analytics, so you take some classes to improve your skill set as a manager in data science. But then you have that sort of career switcher who is really trying to make a switch into a new career that's ladder-based. We want to make sure it's stackable. And that group is a very different client than the first group. This group needs more services. We need to make sure there's financial aid or some way to pay for this often. But we take the learnings and we want to make sure that every one of those opportunities has a guaranteed interview at the end.
Guaranteed interview.
That's the piece that we think we really owe it to the student to say, you aren't just throwing your money away to take something that you hope will pay off with an employer, that we're standing behind it to say it does pay off with employers, otherwise we wouldn't offer it.
But I think that's really super important, guaranteed interview. But the other important thing, I think it's misconception maybe from the whole call. We're talking about relationships with employers, but we're not talking mostly about customized contact training. We are mostly talking about employer input in open enrollment programs. Yep. This is not just Steve telling, this is not the old community college business where I'm serving that employer who's figured out how to, whatever game the system.
No, you're right.
That's important. We should have said that. I should have made sure we were clear about that from the top.
Yeah, less than 10% of our about 15% of our revenue is from apprenticeship and customized training. Out of that, roughly 10 million. So about $1.5 million of that. So most of it is that open enrollment student saying, I want to go to NOVA and do some quick training to get into some additional job opportunity or upskill myself in my current field. But that data from the employers is critical to helping us design the programs to make them something you really want to stand behind.
Steve, there's a question here. If you could maybe talk a little bit more about apprenticeships, and it sounds like the Amazon one kind of came from the company. If you could just talk a little bit more about kind of how they originate and kind of challenges and kind of what some of the successes are, that would be great.
Yeah, a lot of challenges do exist. I mean, again, employers do not want to part with their money unless they absolutely have to. So if they know they've got 100 people vacant in Northern Virginia, The question is that vacancy costing them money? And usually if they don't have that extra body, especially in some of the federal contracting world, they're not making money on that contract. So they get very creative to try to find those people. And apprenticeship can often be one in which, I mean, you probably all know the benefits of apprenticeship. It leads to better retention when you set up apprenticeship programs. You get exactly what you want. Because if you just say, I'm going to hire 20 people with different degrees all over the country, they might come in with very different skill sets, very different competencies. It might not really get you what you want. Then you have to still upskill on top of that. So there's lots of selling points for the employers about why they should use an apprenticeship, but there's lots of hurdles to overcome. One is the high cost. We overcome that in Virginia because we do use the Fast Forward program for apprenticeship. So that $12,000 is not what they pay. They pay $3,000 per apprentice, or $4,000 per apprentice, and then they get the additional $8,000 thanks to Fast Forward with the 1/3 and 1/3. So that program is, so you've overcome the cost issue. Often the biggest issue though is it, you know, I hear it's a lot of paperwork. We do all the sponsorship paperwork in-house, so they don't have to take on any of that responsibility. Often, unless you get enough businesses doing the same stuff, it doesn't make financial sense to run a class of one. Because you're hiring an instructor at, you know, $70,000 or $80,000 to teach 12 weeks, and you end up, that's a very expensive apprenticeship. So there is a breakdown of why we're trying to get enough companies participating so that we can, and again, 90% of the curriculum hopefully is the same. So you would then insert any employer who wants to do 1 apprentice or 5 apprentices into a scheduled class, because Amazon doesn't have a whole class every time. They actually encourage us. They say, you know, I've got 7 people who we've made offers to. Let's just run with that one because I'm paying them now. So I need to get going. But maybe the cohort size ideally is 3 or 4 more. And if I have other employers that can fill those seats, it's cheaper for Amazon because they're on the hook to run it with 7, whether they're going to pay the minimum rate regardless. So there's an economic model for them to cooperate. So, but there is a stigma with apprenticeship with a lot of companies that they think, one, if you're in IT, they're not familiar with apprenticeship because it's not a traditional industry you use it in. But if they are familiar with it, often they think it's very unionized. They think, oh, this sounds, no, we're not interested in that. That sounds bureaucratic or union. That's not what we want. When you sit down and talk to them about what it really is, you can sometimes get over that hurdle. But if you send out an email or call someone and say you want to talk about apprenticeship, you usually don't get a call back. So that's why we don't lead with that. It's, again, listening to what employers need, talking about things, and then sharing information from Amazon and our other employers. We have an apprenticeship with alarm.com. Another company just launched it. The more companies that launch it and their CEOs talk about the benefits, we don't have to sell it. We just kind of point to that as one option and see where it goes.
Andrew, you got the master chat there.
Yeah, sorry about that. Finding my unmute button. Those are the majority of questions that have come through. So I don't know if we want to kind of open mic here. If folks want to kind of chime in with specific questions for Steve. This has been incredibly helpful. I think we're a little bit quiet because my sense is you're describing a vision that we aspire to, but it's sort of really pretty far, I think, from where we are at you know, at a high level. And I do think, and again, a lot of excellent sector-based programs. It's a different economy in New York. We're such a huge city, but I think we still have a lot of the kind of catalog-driven focus here. Definitely a number of bright spots in terms of what we do, but I still, if I had to sort of put on that spectrum of real employer focused work and the catalog-driven on the other, you know, we're probably a little bit more weighted towards that end.
But that's why I thought Steve would be sort of interesting, right? Because it's not even so much what he's, I mean, what he's saying is really important, but it's also just like, it's doable. Like, you know, he got there 4 years ago and it was like, sort of like what you have, or in Charlotte, it had the same fragmentation problems. And it's not like going to the moon. Like, there's Steve Partridge, he did it. He doesn't even have the astronaut suit on. And I mean, that's sort of the whole, in a way, the point of this. Yes, it sounds like it's far away, but it's doable and it's just steps.
And the research is the basis of it. I mean,
it is. Yeah, if you start with research, and I did share with you all a link on the chat to our research page. So you can see some of the stuff we put out and you can see the different audiences, the career ladders. some nice tools on there for folks across the community to use. But that was the basis. You know, you have to have the long-term vision, and it does not happen overnight. We're 4 years into this experiment, and we're much further along. We're not to the end game yet. We probably have another 2 or 3 years to the point where I'd say we've got the right program mix, because again, we have to self-fund. So I wish I had like 5 million to make some strategic investments, but we kind of, as we grow the program, we keep investing in new areas. So I'd say 3 more years we'll be at that point in which we can say we've done most of what we wanted to do. But it takes time, and you got to keep that vision going. And it was that initial data that then led to additional relationships that then led to more and more and more. But you know, they say you eat the elephant one bite at a time. You don't just tackle it all at once, because it will be overwhelming, and you're going to have setbacks, especially when I mean, we're one college in one region, even though there's many campuses, and as you know, there's politics between the campuses, and certain people want to cooperate and not, but you're doing this potentially to make it work at scale across many independent entities in a federation of entities. So there's other issues. So the timetable may take a little longer depending on how far you want to go, but you have to start somewhere. And I think once you get that building block of the data and start figuring out how to then tackle those businesses, you're going to get the intel to start building out the programs you need so that you can get people to where they need to go. And once you start setting that success, the businesses will talk it up.
And, you know, just to go back to kind of what we talked when I addressed this group last time, and, you know, we're going to be talking about more in coming weeks with all of you and with the chancellor. COVID's a great, you know, crisis, never let a crisis go to waste. COVID and the kind of disruption that we're seeing all around, you know, everything is going to be an opportunity to kickstart, you know, some steps in a potentially in a different direction. So that, you know, that's kind of the predicate to this conversation is that might be an opportunity for CUNY.
Yep.
Okay.
And we also know that there'll probably be a lot of federal dollars in some form or fashion, because I mean, we all know that with the numbers of unemployed, even if a portion of them return, that will still leave our unemployment numbers really high. And the training system we currently have to pay for that, short of just taking out federal loans or getting Pell Grants, will leave them in the short-term world with very few options, unless the feds put some additional money into the WIOA or a TAC 2.0 or something.
We're hoping they're going to do it better than both of those. But
yeah, I agree. So I think there's going to be lots of opportunities. The question is, are we going to be ready to really act on it? I mean, we can all take money. That's easy. Here's our catalog. Go pick what you want. But again, what we're seeing play out on the streets means we need to do better to make sure what we put in those programs, and we take those out forward to advise people to the right programs that really lead to jobs, that lead them up the economic ladder. So we spend a lot of our time over the past few weeks, are we prepared for when that money comes, and what programs do really make sense for those that are being left behind?
So I know Steve's boss, and I talked to Steve. Steve does not want a job in New York. You cannot have him. I'm only kidding.
The kids did have fun there. The 2 days we went. They came up on the train over the holidays.
Anymore? I'm really grateful, Steve. This is super, super, super good.
Yeah, and so I guess I can tell the wheels are turning by looking at these questions. And so the last question from Kenneth is just, what are the fast facts in terms of the 13,000, 14,000 students that you have? What's the number of programs or sections? Is it limited programs, lots of sections, or is it a lot of programs? Just kind of from just getting the contours of it, could you share some of those kind of fast facts?
Yeah. So my first year was spent figuring out, because I looked at the catalog when I got here, and there was everything, you know, from hobbyist, personal interest, all the way through workforce programs. And then lots of things that said they were credentialed, but really weren't real credentials. So we spent the first year and a half cutting our catalog dramatically. We had, when I got here, about 20,000 students, and we said goodbye to about 7,000 of them. We fired them. Because
he talks like an employer. We fired the
students. We fired we said there's other people that probably do this better than us, or that it doesn't make a lot of sense. We had everything, ed2go, online classes, everything, because it was really about being everything to everyone. So it was a huge catalog. and it took a lot of time to put together. It took even more time to input all those into our database to set them up and recruit faculty and do all this, to then see some of the cancel rates, you know, in the 25% range, because you had so much out there that you couldn't, I mean, because everyone always wants their class promoted. Would you do a marketing campaign for my walking tour of downtown Alexandria? No, I'm not. So we cut back and really said, we're the workforce division. So it either needs to be additive for someone to take a class that those skills will help them grow in their career, or someone that's making a career switch. And we gutted that. I mean, we got rid of about 60% of our catalog.
Wow.
And again, our revenue hasn't fallen dramatically. We're probably about $1 million off where our high point was when I got here 4 years ago, but our staff is a third the size, but our enrollment numbers didn't drop dramatically. So it's much more focused, tied into that labor market analytics.
It's great. Gotta have some, it's not work for the faint of heart.
No, it was scary, because when your whole team is paid by that and they see us cutting stuff in the catalog, they're all freaking out the whole time going, are we gonna have enough money to pay ourselves? And you know, as positions vacated, we didn't replace them. We changed the jobs and replaced those we needed. So I think anyone that's left on the team 4 years later, everyone has a new job description. Everyone's got new duties. We've got to organize ourselves differently. But again, our product is trying to be very different. It's not something for everyone. We you know, the community college of the old, where we're everything to everyone, just, we cannot afford that model anymore. We have to be much more focused on what we're trying to achieve in the big picture.
That is a really good point, and unless, really good point to end on. Unless there's any other burning questions, this was really incredibly helpful and inspiring is kind of like a funny word, but inspiring, but like in a really tangible way. I mean, as Tamara was saying, it's not kind of inspiring that it's out of reach. It's kind of really just the discipline of knowing what we can do, what we can afford to do, and what we ought to do. And so this is really, really helpful. Any last questions, or always happy to give folks 9 minutes back. And we're really deeply appreciative, Tamar, for your suggesting this, for taking the Steve Tamar show on the road up to New York via Zoom. And Steve, really thank you very much for your really valuable time. I still cringe when I think about H2Q and Amazon, but really excited to see you leading the system and excited to kind of hear what you've been able to do with that. So comrades in arms on that one, even though we kind of lost out.
I know, but you know, it was a good competition, but I put my email in the chat. If anyone has any questions and follow up, please feel free to drop me a note.
Excellent.
Great, thank you.
Thanks, Angie, for the opportunity. Thanks, Steve,
Yeah.
for doing such a really, you know, home run job.
Thank you, everyone.
Excellent. Really, really eye-opening. Well put, Fern. All right, well, with that, have a wonderful day, everyone. Steve, Tamara, thank you so much again. Really appreciate the time, and we'll be in touch, I'm sure.
Thank
And
you.
Alex will be our new friend who we will follow
Yes, please follow him on Twitter.
Excellent.
Great. Thanks, everyone.